So the first thing we have is the dendrites, part of the neuron, and they receive info from other neurons. The cell body, or the soma, processes this information and sends it down the axon. On the axon is the myelin sheath, which insulates the axon, helping it to send the signal more efficiently. And then there's also the nodes of Ranvier, which reset the signal so it can keep its strength, because without them, the strength of the signal would get weaker and weaker. After the axons, we have the terminal buttons, which send the signals to other neurons around them. And then there is a junction between the terminals of one neuron and the dendrites of another, and this is called the synapse. There's another term, the synaptic gap, which is not quite interchangeable. The synaptic gap is the gap itself between these two, but the synapse is like the whole junction. So for a neuron to send out a signal, we have to look at an action potential and if that will happen. So basically, there is this threshold of excitation, and if this threshold, which normally sits at -70, goes up to -55 or higher, an action potential will be met and these signals will be sent, and this can't be reversed. With this, neurotransmitters flood the synapse, and some of them bind to the dendrites of the next neuron, and some stay in the synapse. Now, some of these neurotransmitters are destroyed, but others are saved in a process called reuptake to be used again later. There are many neurotransmitters, and we only have time to cover so many, but what is important to note is that we have inhibitory neurotransmitters and excitatory, and basically the excitatory ones want to stimulate brain activity, want to increase it, and inhibitory neurotransmitters want to decrease brain activity. Dopamine is the first neurotransmitter we'll look at, and this is linked to reward, motivation, and motor control. Now, when you have a lack of dopamine neurotransmitters, you tend to have worse motor movement, which is why, this can lead to things like Parkinson's. And also, with the fact that dopamine is linked to reward, this is often linked to addiction with certain drugs that inhibit the reuptake of dopamine. So now we'll talk about serotonin, which is related to mood regulation, impulse control, and dreaming. When we have a lack of serotonin, it tends to lead to more anxiety and depression, and SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, help to keep serotonin in the synapse so that we feel in a better mood. You don't tend to see noticeable effects from SSRIs for a few weeks, which is why it can be so difficult to get out of depression even with the medication, because we hope to see results sooner than later, and often they come later, and when you're depressed, it's hard to keep a habit. GABA is another neurotransmitter, and this one is responsible for telling neurons not to fire. It's inhibitory. And when we don't have enough GABA, we can have more anxiety and also have seizures, as seizures tend to occur from overactivity of the brain. Okay, next we have acetylcholine, which is related to muscle contraction and blood pressure. And when we have too little of acetylcholine, this tends to lead to muscle weakness and muscle disorders, and this is also a big contributor to Alzheimer's disease. Okay, next we have glutamate, which is related to learning, memory, and sending signals to different parts of the brain. With a lack of glutamate, we often have difficulty concentrating and memorizing, and we often feel more exhausted. Okay, next we have endorphins, which help to lower stress, relieve pain, and improve mood. When we don't have enough endorphins, we tend to have mood swings, and we can become more depressed, and our pain receptors are activated more, so we tend to have more pain and aches. Okay, lastly, we have norepinephrine, which is related to cognition, attention, stress, and arousal. So when we have decreased levels of norepinephrine, we tend to have memory problems, changes in heart rate and blood pressure, more anxiety, and also more depression.